going to turn off my camera and I will let Dakota take it from here. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Dakota.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, thanks.
So, what was your life like before it was interrupted by the war in the Shoah?
Well, I had no life before the Shoah because I was born in 1941, 1942. The exact date is not known. And this is where the Nazis were already in the what was then Poland, now it's the Ukraine. So I was born in what is now the Ukraine, in a small village, not far from the city of Rovno, which was actually the Nazi headquarters for the Ukraine. My mother went into hiding. First, I think she was in a ghetto. The Nazis established a ghetto for all the villages, all the I don't know if townlets, all the villages around in a town of Kostopol, which is about 40 kilometers from Rovno. And then she was able to go into hiding. She hid, apparently it was very difficult to take care of a baby. Anybody who has a baby, to take care of a baby in hiding was extremely difficult. So through a friend, she was able, a friend of hers or a friend of my father in the meantime escaped when the Nazis through that go-between. She was a Catholic family, 8 or 9 months old. And I stayed with this Polish Catholic family till the end of the war. Now this family, their name was Pulit, the last name, Pulit, P-U-L-I-T. They had 2 teenage daughters, early teenage ages, like maybe 11 or something like that. But they too were harassed very much by the Ukrainian nationalists. In the Ukraine at that time, those problems really continue up till today. The Ukraine never had independence, and they hoped that the Nazis will give them independence. So they were collaborating with them. So the Ukrainian and ultra-nationalists harassed and they killed and murdered Poles. So they were running, they were escaping. And later on, Mrs. Pulit, her name was Mariana, she carried me in her arms for miles and miles, running away. There was someone who knew that this was not their child, wanted to tell on them. Well, telling the Nazis that you are hiding a child, a Jewish child, meant death. So they were able to, I don't know how, they were able to leave the Ukraine. All that lasted about a year and a half. The running away from the Ukrainians and so forth. I was an infant the whole time. At one point, they wanted to sell me to another family, but the daughters didn't want it to happen. And eventually, I don't know if probably the Germans sent them as forced labor to occupy territories in Western Europe. So first, I went with them to Holland. For a while, they were in Holland. And from Holland, they went once again as forced labor to a place near Hanover, which is in the north of Hanover or Hamburg, I'm not sure, in the north of Germany. We stayed there till the end of the war, till 1945. I do not remember anything really about the running away, but I do remember living in a city or in a place that had a river, and I was playing on the banks of the river. This must have been, I must have been already 4 years old or something like that. I don't, later on, the family, Mariana Pulit wrote to me, and she told me that we experienced hunger too, and I was crying, of course. And then we returned to Poland. At that time, Poland was already occupied by the Soviet Union, so they could not return to the place where we were all born. They were also born in the same place, the village in the Ukraine, and they settled in Silesia, which is close to the border of Czechoslovakia in Germany. There I stayed for a while. That was in 1945. And I do remember things from there. I do remember already the beautiful, the fields. He was a farmer, Mr. Pulit. I remember the fields. I remember going to church on Sundays. They were a religious Catholic family. And there are memories, flowers and so forth. At that point, my part of my mother's family, I didn't know. I was sure that I was part of the family. I didn't know anything about being Jewish. At that time, one of my remaining aunts, the sister of my mother, returned to Poland. At that time, the Russian government, the Soviet government, allowed Polish nationals to return to Poland. So she returned to Poland after receiving a letter from my mother. How did she receive a letter from my mother? I'm not quite sure. They must have had a center where they collected all the letters or whatever information. And she decided to go. What she read in the letter is that I, the child, was given to a family by a certain name. And there is a possibility that I survived. So my aunt followed that, and she went to Poland. It took her 24 hours from the Soviet Union to Poland, and she started looking for me, first by looking in archives. She didn't find anything in the archives, then publishing in a newspaper that a family by a certain name, please contact. And the family's name, that was the name, not Pulit, but I forgot the name. You know, my age is kept catching up with me too. And Bodnerak, or Bodnerak, that means, somebody once told me that it means a barrel maker, the meaning of the and she did not receive any answer, but at one point after publishing an ad, she received an answer, and the person who answered said, "Why are you looking for us?" So she got in touch. She met that young person. This was a young person, and she told him everything. She had to take trains and till she reached him. He was a young person. And she told him the story, and she said, yes, my sister's daughter was saved by the Bednarek family, and do you know anything about it? And he said, yes, that's my aunt. So through him, my aunt eventually, she was accompanied by an officer. This was a very dangerous time for Jews to travel in Poland. With an officer, she reached the village where the family was and where I was too. And I remember that when she came. She stayed there for about a week. She presented herself as her mother, because the law was you only return Jewish
Your
children
mother.
to your mother, not to anyone else. She presented herself as my mother, but Mr. Bednarek, who was still alive, he said, "You are not her mother." I guess he remembered the way my mother looked. But she insisted, I guess there must have been some similarity, and the years of the war passed. And she got the permission to, at that time, Jewish organizations gave rewards, a monetary reward for people who hid children. And so they offered that monetary reward, and eventually they gave it to my aunt, gave me to my aunt. I understand from later correspondence that Mr. Polit took it very hard, used to cry at night. After all, they raise a child from from a few months old till age 5, you get attached. And with my aunt. So I left them. I thought, how was I convinced to leave them? I was told that I'm going to visit cousin in a big city. The big city at that time was Lodz in Polish. Lodz, that was an industrial city. And my aunt took me with her. She was part of a commune of young people who intended to go to live in Eretz Israel, or the way they called it then, it was under British control, Palestine. I stayed, I remember that, I remember the big city, I remember her taking me to take a picture, a photo to send to her sister who survived. And from there, after the war, after World War II, Jews who survived had to cross borders, sometimes illegally. And we crossed borders from Poland to Czechoslovakia and then to Austria. I remember the crossing. I remember falling into ditches and lorries and so forth. And then finally we reached Austria. And in Austria, in a DP camp, displaced persons camp, I met my father. My father survived he survived in the Soviet Union, actually being sent to Siberia to labor, to forced labor, and from there he was sick, and he had an option to join the Red Army to go fight the Nazis. So he joined, and eventually he ended up in Austria. This is where I met my father. In Austria, we stayed for a year. I learned my first grade. I also learned the Hebrew, and from there we went to Israel. Israel was already established. In Israel, I lived 1 year with an aunt that came to Palestine in the 1930s. And then I lived with an aunt in Jerusalem till I actually got married, close to the time that I got married. So this is pretty much my story. I did not experience any concentration camps or ghettos, but obviously I absorbed the fear, the fear that people had at home. I absorbed the fear. I experienced hunger. Those things actually accompany me till this day. And I always mourn my mother's death, because it's very difficult to live without a mother. Okay, so this is my story. I don't know what to tell. Oh, I see one question was, what was my teenage years were in Israel already. So I went to elementary school, from second grade to high school. Then I went to the Israeli army, and then I went to the university and so forth. So I think this is what I think I'm answering some of the questions. Now, what would my life had been had the war not been, had the war did not occur? I would probably live in Poland. I don't know really what my life would be, a regular life in Poland. But this is the way how it happened.
Do you think your would
Um,
have do you think your life would have been a lot different, like when you were a teenager, if you hadn't gone through all of that? Like, do you think it shaped you into who you are?
Very much so, yes, it did shape me. I think that I always felt a stranger, an outsider, because I really was not part of any family. I was not a part of my aunt who took me from the Polish family. I was not part of my father's family who remarried. I was really not part of my aunt that I lived with. I felt an outsider. Yeah. And this is because, of course, because of the war, because of the fact that I did not have a family. I never had grandparents. I never, neither maternal, not fraternal. Didn't have really an extended family with cousins. Everybody was killed. So the grandparents were killed in the ghettos, in those ghettos where they dug their own ditches and they were shot into. And yes, this is how I felt, obviously. So the only time I really started to feel that I belong is when I got married and I had my own children.
So how old were you whenever you got married and had your own children?
I was 26 when I got married. And then after, I think 5 years, I had my first child, and a couple of years after my second daughter, you met my daughter. So yes, now there was a question there, what was taken from us? Life was taken from us more than anything else. It was life, it was people. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother had a shop. So of course the shop was something like a grocery store. And then what was inside the homes? These were not really riches, but property, right? I had a dream to visit the place where I was born. I never was able to do that because of now family, because of situation here in a current situation. My mother-in-law was sick, and now my husband is sick. So I never had a chance really to visit the place. Everybody wants to know where they were born. This is basically it. I don't know what else I could. What did I learn in Israel? I learned a lot of things in Israel. I learned the Hebrew language. I learned Jewish history. I learned a Bible. I learned that the Jewish people need a state of their own, a state where they could defend themselves. The Jews were not allowed to have any weapons when they were in Poland. They could not respond. They could not defend themselves. These were the things that I've learned.
So what lessons would you want to teach younger generations, like people in my generation?
Right, I know exactly what you ask. Tolerance. To be tolerant of others, to be tolerant of other faith, people who have other faith here, whatever it is, of other ways of life, not to persecute others because they're different, and not to pick on others either. So this is what I learned.
Okay, so the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh has been around for 40 years now. How has the Holocaust Center been a big part in your life?
Well, first of all, I taught here. I was a teacher for over 40 some years. So I always taught my students whenever the opportunity was about Yom HaShoah and so forth. I taught them about my personal experiences, but also the history. So I was part of that. Whenever I really didn't lecture too much like I'm doing now in front of other audiences because I was busy teaching. So I didn't really have that much time. I don't know if you saw it. There is around Yom HaShoah, they show on channel 13, WQED, they show a documentary, but I took part of it from Poland from Pittsburgh to Poland. There were 3 survivors, and if you have a chance, you could see it. I'm sure that they'll show it. So 2 of them already died, and I say it's my turn now, I guess. But we were 3, and I had the luck to visit the Polish family. Whoever is still alive was still alive. That happened in 2006, so it's a while ago, 15 years. So, and I was very happy to see the place where I have some memories from. The church, I visited that lovely, small, bright church, and the house where my aunt picked me up from. I was very, very fortunate to be there. So this is my connection. But I was always part of the Holocaust Center ever since it was established. I was part of it, and taking part in meetings and so forth. At one point we had a project that materialized. Hello? Oh, we had a project that materialized into a book that is called Flares of Memory. Did you ever come across that book? That's Pittsburgh Survivors, Flares of Memory, memories of survivors in Pittsburgh. So my story is there too. It's called Lost Families and others. So it's an area. There were people who experienced horrible experiences in concentration camps, labor camps, and so forth. And also my story is there. So yes, I'm in touch. This is how you actually got in touch. Yeah.
That book that you're discussing, we actually learned about in class. Our teacher has a copy of it and showed it.
Yeah, Flares of Memory, right. So it later on it was published by Oxford University Press. So it was accepted all over. And when I was in Poland, in Krakow, they have a bookstore, and I saw that book there, and I couldn't believe it, that a book from Pittsburgh is in Krakow. So yeah, I saw that. Yeah. So if you have that book, you could read my story there. Lost families. That's the main loss, really, more than anything else. Yeah. I don't know. I think.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your Holocaust story that we haven't talked about already?
No, I don't. I think I said everything. That aphorism, or really it's the truth. Don't treat others the way you wouldn't want to be treated. This is basically it. That's it.
Okay. So is there anyone for whom you light this candle?
Yes, for my mother. I would like to really light a candle for the Polish family the Polish family that saved me, but I don't have 2 candles here, so I have the candle. Yes, it's for my mother. Her name was Miriam. Here's the candle. Do you see it? Does she see the candle?
Yeah, I know.
Yes, I see it.
Yes, well, I'll keep it lit till it extinguishes. Yeah, even though I have on Yom HaShoah, I light a candle for her too. And did you ever attend one of those Yom HaShoah? Well, nowadays with the corona, you can't do it, but did you ever attend the Yom HaShoah ceremonies where a lot of people come?
Holocaust Remembrance.
Yeah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Did you ever attend it in
I
Pittsburgh?
actually haven't gotten the chance to.
Okay, so at the end of it, people light 6 candles and 1 candle in memory of the righteous among the nations, which means those people that endanger themselves by saving Jews. So there's a special candle for them. Yeah. I think I answered everything else. I don't know. You know, my story is a story that is made actually on from 4 different stories. It's my story. It's my mother's story, how she was in hiding. It's my father's story, how he was in the Soviet Union. And of course, my grandparents and everybody else who perished. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you
welcome.
so much for sharing with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. What made you being interested in that?
So we have our Holocaust class in our high school, and it's just kind of like a rite of passage class that most of us take part in because a lot of our neighboring districts don't have something like that yet. So it's an experience that we as Shaler students get that not a lot of other districts get. And it's just something that I feel passionately about that more people should know about.
Yeah, you're very right. People never heard about it.
Yeah, especially with in my lifetime, we can remember the shooting that happened in the synagogue a few years ago, and that's something.
2 years,
yeah, in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So that's something very close and personal that my generation has experienced that I think really brought a lot of people together to realize that stuff like this does still happen, and we need to fix it.
Yeah, that's very nice that you say that it needs to be fixed.
Definitely.
So, thank you. So thank you, and thank you, your teacher.
And thank you so much for joining us today. Dakota, whenever she was a student in my class, she actually did a project where she researched Solange Leibowitz, who lives in Pittsburgh, and she read about, and I'm sure that you know a lot of the people that she learned about, and this is all our effort to make sure that we carry on these stories. And your story today was recorded, and it will be shared with the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, and it will be used.
They have my story because they have it in it from Pittsburgh to Poland documentary. They have it, but it's okay. I know.
I think what we'll get out of this program that's unique is 6 different school districts in the Pittsburgh area with 6 different students interviewing 6 different Pittsburgh people, and that will be combined into one video, which we have so many individual stories. It's so nice to see a collective student-led interview. We have so many testimonies, but so few of them that have been recorded with 17 and 18-year-olds interviewing our community members. So thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this program.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And if you need anything, you can feel free to call me, or you can have your daughter email me or call me as well. So thank you again, and have a fantastic day.
Thanks.
Thank you.